Welcome everybody. Happy Midsummer, happy St. John's Day, and happy Litha and all the rest of it. This is going to be our wonderful Midsummer quiz with the
Hey,
lovely Mr. Soup.
yep, yeah, and I don't have any body hair to eat. I mean, obviously I have some body hair, but we're gonna have to make something, some sort of protein bar or something at some point.
Oh man, as much as I love these films, they have done so much damage.
Yeah, yeah. Midsummer, yeah.
But not as much damage as the
No.
Victorians, as we will soon find out.
Oh, as always, they're so
Uh,
pathetic.
so for those who don't know, this is how to play. This is our quiz, and we are going to find out the truth behind Midsummer Festival, Midsummer customs,
Hmm.
and whether or not they are actually ancient or pagan or not.
Okay.
Soup has he has his board ready
Yep.
of the Franklin.
There's literally a parcel on its way to you labeled the Franklinator. The
Oh,
person
amazing.
at the post office was like, "Is this their name?" And I was like, "Yeah." So on
That's
on the customs, yeah, yeah,
I have sent things to England that just have like smiley faces on them, and nobody asks questions, but that's
yeah,
Canada Post for you.
yeah,
They
yeah,
don't care as long as you give them money. So,
yeah.
so very first question,
Okay,
and I know you're going to get this one right because I did a video on this one.
okay.
Number
And
one.
I watch all your videos, obviously.
Well, at least you liked this one, so I don't know if you actually just, you smashed
Oh,
the
that's a
like
good
button in the
point. Yeah.
toilet or you.
Okay, come
So,
on, hit me.
are midsummer
Yeah.
and summer solstice the same thing?
No,
No, they're not. No.
no, they're not.
No, the solstice refers to the celestial event,
Yeah.
and the longest day of the year, the longest day of the year, and that changes every year. Sometimes it's 21st, sometimes 22nd, etc.
Hmm.
And that can be calculated, and that is a completely different calculation to midsummer. And like we said, so the solstice or the sun standing still can happen anytime from the like evening of the 20th to the morning of the 24th of June. And midsummer refers very specifically to either Midsummer Eve, 23rd,
Hmm.
Midsummer's Day, or St. John's Day, 24th, and very possibly all the way up until the 29th. And we'll get to why in a second. Okay,
Okay.
so give yourself a point, Sue. Very good.
Thank you.
And this one I think you'll know too, because we discussed this when we talked about May Day.
Hmm.
Is summer solstice the beginning of summer?
No,
Mm,
no,
no,
no.
really, not really. No, I
Ah,
mean to
phew.
be
Okay.
fair, it does depend where you are. In the States, they
Uh-huh.
claim that like the was it the 23rd of June is the beginning of summer, but really no, it depends where you are in the world. In Ireland, obviously, Bealtaine is their beginning of summer.
Yeah.
In and even though and thing is that in the States they say it's their beginning of summer, but by that time, especially in the American South, it's been hot for weeks.
Mm.
So there's no
Mm.
point in saying the end of June is the beginning of summer. No, that was a meteorological thing that was made up ages ago. According to the National Trust, solstice and midsummer are neither one of them is technically summer, like the beginning of summer.
No.
And that's that. Yeah. So, and end of that question. And just as a point, though, as well, in places like northern Poland and in the Pomeranian Kashubian regions, even though they do keep this as the quote unquote beginning of summer, but as well that's in the north. Whereas there it depends where your country is. It depends on
Hmm.
everything, but technically, no, it's not the beginning of summer,
No.
because summer's already been going. Uh, Number three. Oh, we're getting into the spicy one.
Okay.
Is midsummer an ancient Celtic holiday?
I'm gonna say no, no, yeah, no, no,
Sorry,
It-
kids. The answer
no,
is the soup. You're knocking them out of the park today.
yeah.
The pagan religions in ancient British Isles, by Professor Ronald Hutton, says solstices and equinoxes were not celebrated by Celtic
Mm.
peoples.
Mm.
as religious festivals. And it would make sense because obviously we have holidays like Bealtaine and like Samhain, and they neither are on the equinoxes or the solstices. Sorry.
Well,
And
but and yet though,
mm,
you can see why the Victorian Association comes around, because places like stone circles
whoa,
and
we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that.
okay,
We're gonna get to it. I
okay,
promise.
okay. I'll put a pin in that, as they say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But to be fair, then, and so to be fair, it might have been associated with an ancient holiday in Wales because do you know what Midsummer is in Wales, Mark?
Oh, you've already caught me out on this, I think, before, haven't you? And I just completely forgot. No, I do not know. No.
So we talked about Nos Galan,
Yeah.
which is April 30th.
Yeah.
And we talked about which is the or also Calan Mai, but it is oh God, I'm gonna ruin I'm sorry, I'm gonna ruin this. Nos
Yeah.
Gwyl Ifan?
Is it Gwyl Ivan?
Gwyl Ifan, I guess. No, Nos
Is that
Gwyl
and
Ifan.
is that IFAN at the end?
Yes, correct. Ifan. I
Okay.
know
Yeah.
the F is a V sound, yes.
Yeah.
And so that is June 23rd, which is the eve of Gwyl Ifan, which is obviously St. John's feast.
Yeah.
But these days were the you're, these were the Ysbrydnos, the ghost days of Wales, the three ghost days.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Ysbrydodnos. Ysbrydnos,
Yeah.
I guess.
Ysbrydnos. Yeah. Ysbrydnos. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Phew.
Got to roll the R. Rah.
Sorry, Ysbrydnos. There you go.
Ysbrydnos. Yes.
With the, I have to put the intonation into it also.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What in the Michael Sheen is this?
Yeah. 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 What in the name of Michael Sheen? Yeah, is going on here. Yeah.
I love how
Yeah.
he's now the patron saint of Wales. It's
Oh, he
amazing.
is. Yeah. Yeah.
So these 3 days were they're considered to be one of the ghost days in Wales.
Mm. Okay.
Um, and uh, and the three key elements of the calendar were the summer birch, a bonfire, and St. John's wort. So it's
Wow.
possible, we don't know if this was conflated with another holiday or not. We're not really sure.
Right.
Some claim as well that there were lamb sacrifices made to sun gods on this day because there is a lot of lamb eaten around this time, but there's no archaeological evidence that feasts were made with a lamb sacrifice specifically for the sun or specifically for the solstice at all.
Well, I'm sure you do know, but I just think it's worthwhile laying this out for the audience at home. Do you know why there's so much lamb eaten at this time of year?
I mean, I know the shearing goes on this time of year.
Well, because there's lots of lambs around.
Yeah,
Yeah,
obvious, yes.
yeah. But
They,
also, but also as well. Actually, this is you may find this interesting, folks at home. Archaeologically speaking, you see the management of different types of herds and flocks through who gets slaughtered when, or
Mhm.
particularly which sex gets slaughtered when. So one of the big ones is in dairy herds. Often all of the males get as I said get murdered, get are slaughtered are slaughtered when they're calves, all but obviously the ones that they want to keep on for breeding, because having the girls around is enough to keep the coos producing milk. And you can tell that just from the bones that you find. So, and statistically, even though most of them won't survive, you can see the statistical significance of different bones surviving. So, in the case of the lambs, yeah, it's just that time of year. The lambs, yeah.
Exactly, but that is exactly so. It is just that time of the year. Lamb is a popular midsummer feast food,
Hmm.
especially in Ireland and other parts of the world. But some people believe it maybe has more of a link to do with St. John and Christianity.
Hmm.
But again,
Mm.
there isn't that much evidence for that either,
Oh,
to be
oh,
fair.
sorry, as in the lamb of God,
Yeah,
kind of thing. Yeah, okay,
exactly.
okay,
Yeah, Azazel or
yeah,
yeah, the Lamb of
yeah,
God. Exactly. So yeah, I mean there are other feast days that are associated with lamb, like Saint Agatha's Day and all that stuff, where
right.
they bring the lamb into the church. But again, there's no archaeological evidence for
No,
it
no.
being particularly a Christian thing.
Hmm.
There's record though of an agreement between Lord and tenants of the manor in East Monkton in Wiltshire in the reign of King Henry III, by which the former promise to provide a ram for a feast. If they actually carried if they did the blessing of the fires and carried the fires around the cornfields on Midsummer's Eve. And he promised this by way of payment for their services rendered, but there doesn't seem to be any religious significance for this, either Christian or pagan at all.
No, no.
Very good, Soup. Very good. Okay.
Hmm.
So I'm sure you can probably guess this one now. Did the Vikings celebrate Lytha? And is the Midsummer an ancient Germanic holiday?
Yes. The thing is, right. The thing is, I love the aesthetic. I do, and I love the fact that so many people, for example, my good friend Liv in Sweden, actually her birthday this year was on Midsummer as well. No, sorry, coincided with the celestial Midsummer. Sorry,
Yeah, because her birthday would have to
solstice.
be on Midsummer every year.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that was sorry.
Because
So
Midsummer in
this,
Sweden is the 24th. Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, the point is though, I love that for them, but no,
No.
no,
The
yeah,
answer is no.
no.
Lytha is not an ancient holiday, and it's only mentioned in Bede's Reckoning of Time, with regard to the months. So our good buddy Bede says, because he preserves the list of Anglo-Saxon names for the months
Hmm.
in the early Germanic calendar, and this one is Lytha. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly in Anglo-Saxon, which means preceding Lytha, and the other one is Eftra Lytha, after Lytha. And one is considered to be June and the other July, or somewhere around there, right? Because we're
Yeah.
not really sure what their calendar was like. Bede writes that Lytha means gentle or navigable, because both of these months seem to be good for sailing. And that's all he says, kids.
Hmm. Hmm.
Tis it. It's kind of similar to how when we talked about Yule, when like there's a 2-month period with a feast in it, but that's about all we know. Midsummer's Swedish maypole, which many people believe to be a pagan vestige from Vikings or something like that.
Mm.
Uh, it was brought to the country from Germany and France in the medieval period,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the Viking Age was roughly about 400 years before that,
Yeah.
so they
No,
didn't do
exactly.
it.
And also there's so much around maypoles and uh, uh, clog dancing and other medieval traditions that people dress up so much stuff and put so much baggage onto.
Mhm.
Yeah, not at all surprised that people go, oh, it's an ancient tradition. It's a phallic symbol. Like, no, no,
Oh
no,
no,
no.
that was Freud who made that up.
Yeah.
That we know that he was a dunce, and that in terms of that, no, that was not right. As well, like the name Lytha and the story of like the Oak King and the Holly King changing places, that was all
Mm,
made up in the 1970s. So,
yeah.
but by
Mm,
the American New Age movement. So sorry,
mm,
kids. There is evidence of sun worship in the Swedish Bronze Age cults around we could see that from the carvings around 58 to 49 BC.
uh-huh.
All the carvings in Sweden and Denmark showing some people venerating like the sun wheels, or at least we
Yeah, yeah.
think they're sun wheels, throughout Scandinavia and Germany, but there's no actual link to Midsummer for that at all.
No.
The earliest attestation we have of any Germanic peoples celebrating Midsummer is 930 AD. Iceland had Althing, sorry again if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, which is a holiday that was 2 weeks long, established in that year.
Hmm.
There were Sunnenswede in Germany, and in Norway they had like a bridal sort of, not holiday, but I guess meeting for brides of the year. And it's mentioned in the saga of Olaf saga. Oh God, Tryggvasonar on Mesta. Sorry if I messed that up with my Old Norse. King Olav Tryggvason. I think
Okay.
that's how you maybe that's the Danish way because of the Y. Apologies to everybody in Norway. My mistake. Led an army to convert the saga states that he led an army to convert pagans of Trondheim to Christianity, and he then offered them a midsummer's blot as
Right.
sort of a threat if they didn't convert, because he's not
Yeah.
really offering them a nice thing. He's saying if you don't, I'll kill you, but if you do, you'll get a nice party. And but they don't mention the holiday. He says the Midsummer's blot as a thing, but they don't mention what time of year it is. They don't
Yeah.
mention there's an actual festival. And obviously, this goes without saying, but the Ottestupa, the sacrifices that many people mistakenly thought were part of Midsummer, where you push the old people off the cliff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That does never happen.
No. No.
Sorry, they were stories that said that like old people would kill themselves around this time of year to give like as a sacrifice, sacrificing themselves in order to get their harvest out, or to if there were too many people, they would kill themselves. But no, there's no nonsense. It's not
It's
true.
very ultra. Um, the idea is fascinating because it tends to come either from, well, actually, it tends to come from the idea of cultures that are the absolute, perceived as being the absolute antithesis of modern Western society. So, for example, the idea that people would willfully leave children out in the snow to die, or the
Mm-hmm.
idea that
Or send them out into the forest to get killed by boars or something, and if
yeah,
they came
yeah.
back, they were fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, but also socioeconomically, the idea that and this is basically still a myth, really, but it's an interesting one that it's interesting that it propagates around him. Is the archaeologist V.A. Gordon Child, who supposedly, uh, well, my understanding is he did kill himself by jumping off a cliff at a certain age, but he left his reading glasses behind because he was such a staunch communist that he believed that these things should be useful for someone else. And supposedly, again, I have to really tie this down. Supposedly, he reached a point in his life where he thought he was no longer productive for society, so he decided to end his life. But I think one of the reasons why that's such a that story is spread around so much is because it's seen as a warning. Oh, don't be a communist, or they'll be throwing you off the cliff when you
Mm-hmm.
reach 60 or something like that. So it's interesting. Yeah, it tends to be this idea of barbarism or a different socioeconomic outlook that does this to old people. Whereas, as far as as far as we can tell, most people look after other people. Really,
Yeah, it was a very,
you know.
when you always hear the lie of like, oh, ancient people only lived to 35. And you go, no, that was
No.
the average because there was such a high infant mortality rate.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that that was very different. There were
Mm,
plenty of old people. It's just that
mm,
there weren't as many old people as there are now.
mm,
And
mm.
I mean, I myself am getting up there, and I can feel the Logan's Run breathing down my neck, just going, "Are you done yet? Are you done
Oh,
yet?"
but and yet though, we both know people I certainly know people in my life, and by the sounds of it, you do, who constantly tell me I'm young, and it's fantastic. Oh, come on, you're so young. It's just like, oh,
Yeah.
brilliant, yes, yeah,
Yeah, I tell people at 40, they go, "Oh, you're such a baby." You
yeah,
go, "Oh,
exactly,
okay. I'm
yeah.
glad. I'm glad you think so.
Oh yeah,
My left knee disagrees with you, but I respect your opinion."
my right knee, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Um, okay, so if knowing all of this that we do now,
Hmm.
what is the oldest midsummer custom that we know of?
Oh, uh, oh, that's interesting. Is it? I'm going to go back to my Swedish friend here. Is it the frog dance?
No, it's not.
Oh,
But
okay,
very
okay.
interesting that you mentioned that. Maybe in Sweden, I would say that maybe goes back to medieval times.
Uh-huh.
But I was actually waiting for you. Well, I knew you weren't going to say maypoles after everything we've talked about. But a lot of people are like, oh, maypoles are an ancient pagan. No, they're not.
Sorry. Well, if you want, we can just you can rewind, and I'll just go. Is it maypoles? Oh no!
No, it's making fires. Making fires is
Okay.
yeah.
Oh,
So
I was gonna say bonfires.
we have
I think
we do,
the bon
and specifically though, not necessarily bonfires. We actually have from the fourth century, from Saint Vincent's diary, we have a description of how the pagans of Aquitaine in
the
southwest
penguins.
the penguin
The penguins, yeah.
the penguins of Aquitaine in southwestern France.
Tarquin and the penguins, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's turn up at Aquitaine and let's do things. Yeah. My name's Tarquin. So go on.
And I'm just imagining him rolling a burning like wheel down a cliff, going, "Oh no, I couldn't possibly."
Exactly. It's
So
okay. It's from the Volvo. We can replace it. It'll be fine. Yeah. Not the Land Rover. So
that is the oldest record of a
uh-huh.
midsummer anything that we have is people rolling flaming wheels downhill into rivers.
Nice.
And there were a lot of people who thought, oh, maybe this is where the cheese thing came from, but no, that's a completely different thing. Charred pieces were reassembled
Mm-hmm.
and then put into the temple of the sky god. Whether or not that part is true, we're not sure. But the time of the festival, however, was not necessarily specified. But just over 1,000 years later, the monk of Winkham in the Cotswolds referred again to rolling a flaming wheel, and he described it as happening on Midsummer's Eve.
Okay.
And he specifically said the evening before the Christian feast of Saint John.
And do we think it represents the turning of time or the seasons or something, or is
Anybody's
it just
guess,
something to
Soup.
do? Maybe.
Anybody's guess. I
Yeah.
mean,
Okay.
the guess from St. Vincent was that it represented the sun, and then they took the charred pieces and put it in the temple.
Right.
We don't have evidence of that, so we have to
No.
take him at his word. So if
Mm.
that's true, okay. But which sky god was it in Aquitaine? There would be some kind of evidence, something
Mm.
of some kind of sky god worship.
Mm.
Um, Protestant writer, Thomas Neo-Gorges, sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, described it in detail, implying that it was common in Europe on that night to do that kind of thing. There were people in Britain still doing this all the way up until 1909. There's record of it being done in Dartmoor, and people lighting the wheel at sunset and then
Mm-hmm.
watching it roll into the stream.
Okay. Fair
So
enough.
again, it's very interesting that this one little piece, and it seems like they did do it on St. John's Eve, but
Mm.
what it means and why, no
No.
idea.
Yeah.
It's important to
Hmm.
note as well that these, because a lot of people have said, oh, they're ancient Celtic customs, but it's important to note that these fires, like, we have no evidence of that.
Mm.
A survey of the British evidence suggests that midsummer fires were not Celtic at all. Like I said, being found in Wales and the Scottish Highlands, only where English and Scandinavian influence was a thing.
Yeah. Yes.
And so, like, midsummer in general. So if you go to some place in Ireland, so obviously Beltane is the big thing, but they
Mm-hmm.
do celebrate St. John's, but they
Mm.
celebrate St. John's in a different way. So, I mean, there are still fires, but we do not know at all. That's the oldest thing we have, is that flaming wheel going down the hill,
Mm.
and we don't know why they did it.
Which itself is kind of poetic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's, you know,
Yeah, I
things
love
being
this. I love this
destroyed as it
crap.
rolls, and yeah.
Absolutely. I love
Mm.
when people go, oh, why do people do anything? Why do people do anything?
Yeah.
Because we like it. Why do
Well, that
people
sounded so dark. Why do people bother doing
why do
anything?
people do anything?
What's the point?
What's the point of anything? It's all meaningless.
Heat death of the universe is going to happen. Yeah.
We'll all vaporize into the sun eventually. Give it
Yeah.
a billion years.
Yeah.
So speaking of honoring the sun, question
Hmm.
5.
Okay.
Were midsummer celebrations done to honor the sun?
So I'm just realizing I've added a point somewhere. Hang on. Okay. Midsummer celebrations to honor the sun. No.
We don't know. We do not know.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
And that's it. The first recorded fires by John Belithus, a theologian at the University of Paris in the early 12th century. And he states that this was possibly done to honor the sun, but again, that's 12th century. That's 1300s already, and he's just stating that, and we don't know. We do
No.
not know. There is evidence of fire rituals on Midsummer's Eve, from Ireland to Siberia, from Norway to Algeria, but specifically for the sun, we do not know. In Finland, however,
Mm-hmm.
the pre-Christian name for the summer solstice was Ukan Jula. Sorry to Finland if I pronounced that incorrectly. But it's Ukko's celebration. And Ukko is the god of the sky and harvest and thunder. So
Okay.
it
Yeah.
might have had some significance in Finland.
Yeah.
We do not know.
No, and yeah, and that it's interesting, yeah, because you can't even extrapolate uh a reason as to why that's happening at that time of year necessarily, can you? Because the sky is always there. And that's I know, so so I didn't
Yes.
mean that to sound as obvious as it sounded,
No, but
actually.
it's perfect. So it's like, well, the sky's just there. Why do we care about this?
uh, no, but what I mean is this is so much as like, so it was, it's pleasant being under the sky at this point, but it may be more dramatic to celebrate in the rainy season or in the
Hmm.
autumn when you get big red skies, for example. So yeah, it's etymologically interesting, but it can't necessarily be, yeah, extrapolated much beyond that. Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Now that was five, yeah?
I think that was five. Yeah. So here comes
Okay.
six.
Okay, yeah.
Did the Druids celebrate solstice at Stonehenge?
No. No.
We assume that the Druids knew it was there. We
Yeah.
have no evidence of feasting or worship from Druidic times. We know they
Hmm.
certainly didn't build Stonehenge, because
Hmm.
Druids are Iron Age and Stonehenge is Neolithic. How many years between them, Mark? How many years between Neolithic and Iron Age?
I mean, it depends about what part of the Neolithic, but you can say 5,000 years. Like
Yeah.
it's a huge amount of time. And the so what I was going to say, hopefully I can now proceed, is that it's interesting because stone circles and other related monuments, megalithic cairns and tombs, are often clearly associated with alignments, normally summer solstice, and also a winter counterpart. Um, there's a moon association that's been posited for Stonehenge
Yes,
recently.
the Great Lunar Standstill.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And so it's clear that people long before the Druids were doing this. But this is one of the things that I always find interesting about well, one of the conversations that I've been having a lot on TikTok lately, and I know you've seen these, has been to do with the extent to which people can extrapolate, broadly speaking, identity back into the past.
Yeah.
And it's a simple notion, but it's hard to really have in your head when you're looking at the past. Is that things don't always progress in a line that means that people know what was known before and act on that in a way that you expect them to act on because you know what comes next.
Hmm.
We are privileged as observers to be seeing this sort of long story, but the it's entirely possible that your druid, if the druid is at all interested in that sort of time of the year and that sort of ritual, would not necessarily understand or want to understand, or even if they did understand, see it as significant to go to these places and observe the sun rising, or setting, or so on and so forth. And that, um, it's a little bit like the progression from bronze to iron. This doesn't happen because it's metallurgically superior. In fact, it's inferior in the beginning when iron comes along. It's because people make weird decisions and iron just looks cool. So initially people just want iron.
Hmm.
And in the case of your druid, who knows if they cared? Who knows it? Because an awful lot of the stuff that we know about druids, if we know anything really at all,
Hmm.
comes from people who are writing in a way that's for other reasons. You know,
Exactly.
the
So
number of things
the first
so,
record we have of Druids is 3rd century BCE, and from
yeah,
other sources, not from them.
yeah. And so I know that's a slight ramble, but it's just interesting in so much as it really shows how meandering and how, in some ways, counterintuitive this story is, and how what people take on as being significant. Because we now, arguably, I suppose you could say, uh, for example, in Britain, from William Stukely onwards, certainly all the way up to what might be
I'm gonna
called.
get to him, so we're gonna talk about him.
I'm not going to ruin anything, but from that onwards, you do start to have an appreciation for these alignments,
Hmm.
and the fact that almost on a monthly basis, someone's suggesting something about Stonehenge. But that intensity of scrutiny is not something that we should take for granted, even in the medieval period or before, really. Um, and yet it
I
was
also
clear.
want to point out that the Celts only arrived in Britain in 500 BCE.
Well,
And
whatever they were called.
whatever they were called, because we
Yeah,
call them that. They didn't call themselves that.
yeah.
And no stone monuments were built after 1400 BCE.
No. And
So,
yet, they are often called Druidic monuments in that research from the 17th century onwards. So it's not Victorians this time, but the
no, this time,
Victorians
no,
the
this is,
Victorians accepted it though. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, early Britons or Proto-Celts were probably in Britain as early as 2000 BCE. But that's when they were still being built, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they could have very well have been involved in the construction, but that's
Mm,
proto, you know, the Druids came so much later. And obviously when classical writers, like you say, when classical writers tell us about the Druids, we hear nothing about stone circles.
no. No. No,
Nope.
exactly.
Instead, they tell us that actually the Druids gathered in groves and caves and things like
Mm.
that. They don't say
And
anything about stone circles.
well, but also actually on that point, it's interesting that we do know that there was Roman tourism to Stonehenge. So so we know that they were going there. People were going there going, oh, look at this circle. None of them thought it was to do with the Druids. Or at least they didn't mention it anyway on that,
Hmm.
in terms of that tourism. So yeah. Mm.
So
Actually, I need to remember
speaking,
that.
yeah,
I should deploy that next time it comes up. Yeah.
yes, actually, please do,
Yeah.
please clip this and
Yeah.
send them this clip.
Yeah, exactly.
Send it to them in the form of a QR code. So this
Yeah.
way, they'll always know forever.
Yeah, yeah.
This
Maximus's tour guides. We're going to see a stone circle. It has nothing to do with the Druids, by the way.
actually they
Yeah.
wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, if you go far enough back, they wouldn't know who those are.
No.
Speaking of Mr. Stukely,
Yeah.
was summer solstice always celebrated at Stonehenge?
Oh, undoubtedly there were significant
No,
associated
you're not
traditions.
allowed to wheedle out of this yes or no answer.
um,
Was it always celebrated at Stonehenge?
oh, you see, now the wording there is intriguing because are you saying consistently,
Yes,
always?
consistently.
In that case, no.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
I gave you that one. Uh, as we just said, first of all, there's no ancient writing that mentions Stonehenge. The
No.
Romans don't mention it. They don't mention any sun worship at stone circles at all, and they would have
Hmm.
done, especially if there were pagans around for sure. Some scholars believe that Greek Diodorus might have mentioned it in the 1st century BCE because he talks about a spherical monument in the land of
Ah,
the Britons that he says was sacred to Apollo. But he was probably describing the stone circle at Callanish on the Isle of Lewis.
right.
Um, Henry of Huntingdon was the very first person to write about Stonehenge in 1130. And then
Right.
obviously followed by Geoffrey of Monmouth, who linked it to King Arthur. Thanks, dude. Who linked it to King Arthur. Even though he doesn't mention the sun, he doesn't mention Midsummer,
Hmm.
but he does seem to know that the stones had been brought from the west, which is kind of funny. And he
Hmm.
does know that there were burials around it. I
Hmm.
wonder what he was doing there.
Hmm.
According to English heritage, obviously, Stonehenge was entirely forgotten about for a very long time. 3000 BCE was when the earthwork building was done,
Hmm.
and people buried their dead in the bank and ditch in the 56 holes. But there was no alignment with the sun at all during the
No.
early period.
No. No.
It's in its early phase, it was the moon that was more important.
Mm.
And that's hence the Great Lunar Standstill that's now being studied, and that is
Mm.
being studied specifically this year too, in 2024. Because it only, I think it's once every 18 years or so, there is an alignment with the Great Lunar Standstill. So they're trying to discover whether or not that was the original purpose. We'll see. For how the stones were placed, or how things were placed. Because 500 years later, then the stones were put up, which was then aligned with the setting of the sun on or around June 2021. The erection and presence of the heel stone means that the sun became important eventually, right? Because that's where the sun.
Because that's effectively drawing a line.
Exactly.
Through the, yeah.
And as you said, our good friend William Stukeley was the one who was surveying Stonehenge. And he identified that Stonehenge was aligned with summer solstice only in the early 18th century.
Yeah.
So around 1860, then John Furnham gave a lecture there to see if they could observe the sunrise, and only a few hundred people came. But the Earl of the Earl.
I'm so sorry. That's such a relatable academic issue. But for
It
goodness
gets
sake,
worse.
you set up this lecture for for one, the only day it can be on that year, and only if you
Like 2 people show up. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
That's the most relatable academic thing ever. It gets even better. The Earl of Carnarvon in 1885 came to see the midsummer sunrise at Stonehenge in 1885, and he invited people, and apparently he was entirely alone.
Oh, poor guy.
He did write about it, yeah. In 1891, there were 3,000 people who showed up, and from that date, people started coming. However, in 1974, there was the Stonehenge Free Festival at Midsummer. People came and camped, but in 1985, that was banned. And from 1985 to 2000, absolutely nobody was at Stonehenge because English Heritage banned it.
Yeah,
I mean, and obviously as well, at Stonehenge, there are technically 2 solstices that are recorded. There's the midsummer sunrise and the sunset. And obviously there's also the midwinter sunrise and sunset. Woodhenge is aligned with the midsummer solstice sunrise, the southern circle on the midwinter solstice sunrise as well. The final part of the avenue is aligned with the solstices, but it was built much later and built into the natural ridges and the chalk. Maze Howe and Newgrange are both winter solstices. So whether or not it was the Beaker people coming over to Britain who changed things and made Stonehenge different, we just don't know. But there's evidence on Jersey Island, and the continent for prehistoric sun worship in general, but maybe we don't know if it's like directly at these stone circles. Every 19 years is the major lunar standstill that happens at Stonehenge, and this year is the year, and they are currently studying it. And you can even watch it live on by English Heritage. As well, luminaries were in slightly different positions thousands of years ago. So to say that Stonehenge was built to calculate or venerate the summer solstice when it was originally built is questionable. We don't know.
And that's why it's, people might have seen a little bit earlier. I sighed when you mentioned something about studying the solar alignment, and the problem is even if you can guarantee that the stones haven't moved within our knowledge, as English Heritage themselves say, they were forgotten inverted commas for so long by, so shall we say, mainstream culture. Who knows? I mean, there are issues with stone circles across the UK, but particularly in farmland where farmers move stones, or they've actually gathered stones together, because often you have to do rock cleaning, stone clearing, if you want to use especially increasingly modern machinery, especially in the 1900s. It became much easier to do, but also much more necessary. And sometimes they would add to monuments in their vicinity. Now, we are quite good at spotting that as archaeologists. We're quite good at figuring out this is probably a later addition by a farmer. But that just raises big question marks as to what happens in those millennia long gaps of knowledge. So the flip side of that coin, though. Sorry, not to go on and on, but the flip side of that coin is that obviously it'd be a tremendous coincidence for these to be simple land clearing movements and to be perfectly aligned with summer solstice or winter solstice, etc. So yeah, it's all a matter of using your head, I guess, and some
As well, people
probability.
forget about other stone circles, but rather I should say circles. Like so, for example, the timber
Mm,
monument at Durrington Walls
mm,
uh, is is aligned with midwinter as well. It's
yeah,
not it's not with
no,
midsummer. And we
no.
have feasting evidence from Darrington Walls showing that
Mm,
people were there more for the winter solstice.
mm.
People have found animals they've eaten and things like that.
Pigs, actually, pigs on
Yes, that's right.
mass.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
One of my sort of mentor archaeologists, Peter Rowley Conway, was really big on pigs. Well, he's still big on pigs. I think he's just retired. But he talked about actually how it. I'm not going to. I like the man too much to indulge in that.
It was
But
perfectly said.
I know. Um, but no, he talked about one of the ideas that I quite like is the idea of ritualistic hunting happening at Darrington Walls, and the idea that you bring in pigs which are clearly domesticated. We can tell this by the size of their teeth, for example. Teeth shrink when an animal is domesticated.
Mhm.
Um, but also as well, they were being shot with arrows. So maybe they were being loosed into an area and then being ritualistically hunted by people who basically at this point are farmers but are relying on this sort of notion of the hunt or wild animals being hunted and then feasted upon in a sort of artificial kind of way. So there was this interesting stuff happening at Darrington Walls, and the only reason why I'm rambling on about this now is because uh, it's crucial to understand Stonehenge as more than just a simple singular monument. It
Yeah,
exists in a landscape.
it's one monument part of many monuments.
Yeah, that are clearly connected. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Mm.
As well, I mean, there are other there are other circles and Neolithic passage tombs, like for example, at Bryn Celyn on Anglesey. Sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
excuse my U pronunciation. I apologize. In Northern Wales, and as well, there's
Yeah.
also like Townley Hall in Louth in Ireland that
Mm,
are connected to the midsummer sunrise.
mm,
And
mm.
yet nobody is going to celebrate there, which I
No.
think is kind of fun. It's a little bit strange and hypocritical because these we know about and they are on the midsummer
Yeah.
sunrise and nobody goes there.
But also, no one's going there to protest the use of oil either. And the reason why I bring that up is that Stonehenge has so much baggage and it's such a focus that I think it's really hard to do.
We
I
should
mean,
get the protesters to build the tunnel.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then bury them in a sacrificial chamber. Yeah. Um, Then, but in that sense, it's really hard, I think, to do really untouched research at Stonehenge because there's so much happening and there's so many presumptions that you have to try and let go as a researcher that come all the way from William Stukeley onwards. It's
The
difficult.
other bit I find is kind of weird is that the whole Breton centric idea because we have other sites as well. So for example, there's a Native American site in New Mexico that
Mm,
also has the sunrise calculated between two slabs of a spiral
mm,
carving.
mm,
And as well in 16th century China, there was at the Temple of Earth, they also presented offerings to sky gods, and they also had a place where the sun would pass through as well. So this
mm,
whole idea, that people were only at Stonehenge and forever at Stonehenge, and we must always go to Stonehenge. I mean, Stonehenge is a triumph, but it's not the only place, and it was very probably it was not originally meant for the solstice,
mm,
summer solstice. It was probably meant for the lunar one.
mm. And whatever's happening at Stonehenge almost certainly was influenced by what was happening on Orkney
Yes,
as well.
exactly. Yeah, the
Yeah,
big Orkney site, absolutely for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
So,
Mm,
um, I just find it funny that I mean, yes, we should all uh enjoy our midsummer if we want to, or our summer
hmm.
solstice if we want to at these sites because they do have significance for people, especially neo-pagan peoples, but um they're not the only ones. And they might not
Mm.
have been for summer solstice anyway. So
Mm.
speaking of which, do the fairies visit on Midsummer, Mark?
I I have problems with fairies.
You should. You're Welsh. They have problems with you.
Yeah. Oh my God, that could be terrible if you clip that and put that into like a Pride Month propaganda thing.
Oh, I'm doing it. I'm doing it, man.
I have no problems
For
with
my
fairies.
people. For my
I
people.
have no problems with fairies, but I have problems with fairies. um, no.
Very good. They do not know.
Ah, yes.
They
Good.
visit on May Day.
Yeah.
So according to the English year, people only well, so why do you think people started associating midsummer with fairies, Mark? It's
Uh,
one place. It comes from one place.
Shakespeare.
Very good. 10 on 10,
Yes.
Mark. Excellent.
Thank you.
It's because of A Midsummer Night's Dream, which takes place on May Day Eve, which is very
Yeah.
clearly delineated in the text. Midsummer Night's Eve, or sorry, Dream was written in the 1590s, man,
Mm.
1590s, and Shakespeare borrowed the Fey aspects from Bealtaine or from Beltane.
Mm.
And they also the play intertwines Midsummer Eve with the events of May Day. And unfortunately, because of the title, the whole point is that it's supposed to give you that sort of confusion of time and seasons. That's what
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
play. But they do say that the slumbering youths are observing the rite of May, air quotes, and it's very clearly May Day. Even in the medieval Book of Seasons, which if you cannot see it, I have it right next to me. There is no mention of fairies, midsummer, nothing.
Mm.
And it talks very briefly of St. John's Day in terms of blessing the fields and collecting St. John's wort to ward off evil, but it
Okay.
doesn't specifically say fairies.
Mm-hmm.
Midsummer had other magical associations, though, especially like we said with regard to plants. Medieval people thought that ferns only flowered on Midsummer Night. They can flower anytime, but they didn't really seem to get the whole idea of spores. They thought that there were
Mm.
seeds somewhere, and that the Fae could help you maybe find the seeds. St. John's wort as well was said to be the Fuger Demonum, the banisher of demons, and they would put it on their stables, their houses. Some people hung it around their necks as well,
Mm-hmm.
thinking to be safe from ill fortune, but doesn't really mention fairies as well. It just as bad luck in general.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
uh, but birches and roses were very important and considered to
Mm-hmm.
be good luck. Birch trees all over the place have a very big association with St. John.
Well, but also as well, it's worthwhile saying that it's another reason why it's worthwhile not thinking it's fairies is that we do know that what is meant to counter fairies are things like iron, for example, metalwork, this kind of thing. So, yeah, there's a good reason. If it was maybe a horseshoe, then possibly it would have more impact. But actually, St. John's Wort, probably not. Yeah.
Exactly so. We get this whole idea of it being a fairy time, really, because there was a 15th century text that claimed that midsummer was a witch's Sabbat.
Mm.
It never has been. The Reformation did away with much of the celebration in southern England because, again, we can't have nice things, and so
Mm-hmm.
therefore people started thinking that, oh, this was like a demon time, fairy time, but it never has been.
Okay.
Even in the this kind this kind of celebration also it thrives in places like South America and North Africa. So midsummer is important, but probably as like a harvest festival,
Mm.
but nothing to do with fairies. Even in the Hebrides and Orkney and Shetland, they call this day Johnsmas,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
they make Johnsmas fires with piles of stones. But again, it's to ward off evil, but not specifically fairies. That's about it.
Although I would love to see a grumpy sort of Yiddish grandma witch talking about the Shabbat. Like, yeah, no one takes it seriously
Oh,
anymore.
I can feel the bubby start coming. But Giovanna,
Yeah.
I should make you a dumb cake.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so because they did have traditions where they made for midsummer where there was a lot of love divination that was popular, and
Okay.
they sowed hemp seeds and they made dumb cakes, And they did have processions, and they did have mock mayors, and like I said, churches were decorated with birch trees.
Hmm.
Nothing to do with fairies, nothing to do with that kind of thing.
It's
Uh,
interesting, isn't it? Because we're not far off having done a full round, are we? When we get back to Halloween, etc., we'll have done much of the year in terms of folk
Christmas
festivals.
is the first one.
Like, sorry, Christmas, sorry. Um, but as we go, okay, so we're quite far off. But as we go, one of the things that's really obvious and really clear is that throughout the year, life was always fun. There was colorful things happening. The idea of mock mayors, or we had similar things happening with servants becoming master for a
Mm-hmm.
day or whatever in other festivals. Uh, it's interesting how no matter the time of year, people are looking for the next party essentially, and that's cool. That's really nice to
Life
sort of
was
reflect
crap,
upon.
so they had
Yeah,
to. It was
yeah,
also hard. I mean, but you had 4 months of the year around, I mean, depending on your country, but maybe 2 to 4 months of the year where you couldn't do any work at all.
mm,
So you had to do something.
mm,
And Christmas was really the big knees up right in the middle of the darkest time of the year, 2 weeks to give people something to be cheerful about, really.
mm, mm,
People, winter brought cold and illness, and the summer brought work and disease. I mean, disease was, it's true, as we will soon see.
yeah,
And it was just, these were punctuations, dot marks on the year to give people something to look forward to,
yeah,
really.
yeah,
And that's, for ages, a lot of these things have been mistaken for pagan, or if they've been mistaken for, well, one of the things I asked you, I think, last time was, why do you think we do it? Why do you think humans have to think that something is ancient when
mm,
people do stuff for the sake of doing things all the time?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we make rituals all the time. It's kind of
Mm.
silly to think that, I go to Comic-Con every year. It's very silly to think that that's a religious sort of aspect to something, or that it's ritual. It's
Yeah, yeah.
ritual.
Well, or for example, earlier this year there was a kite fair out at the coast, and that's been going now for about 10 years or so, apparently. And every year they have these wonderful. So the one we were most impressed by was this giant green octopus with its tendrils floating
Whoa.
and this kind of thing. It was really cool. Uh, but that its longevity has no bearing upon its impressiveness, I guess, or the fact that it's fun to partake in. But it's interesting how, I guess, maybe give it another 20 years, you might have people going, "Oh, our people have always done this. The kites
Exactly.
for the,
Exactly.
yeah, the octopus kite fighting Winnie the Pooh. Yes, that's always always been a thing."
We've
Um,
always been at war with East Asia.
yeah,
Yeah, I know.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I think that is it. It just passes out of
Mm,
memory, and then people wonder,
mm,
why do people do things? It's like the cheese wheeling festival we talked about. Like, why do people do that? Is that an ancient pagan? And we just, well, it was part of certain celebrations around Whitsun that had
yeah.
absolutely zero religious aspect at all.
And I may have said this in a previous episode, but I think it comes down to people not wanting to not have an answer as well.
I do agree with you.
Yeah,
I think people are afraid of the I don't know. And I
yeah.
love the I don't know, because that means we can go find out.
Well, people are afraid, but also particularly, I'm thinking about uh, older members of families. So, for
Um,
example, my mum, her father definitely had a very difficult time saying, "I don't know." And ironically, given that she went on to work in a library for a while, she was almost allergic to going and finding out. She'd much rather give you a made up notion of something. And there are various ways in which I've realized that a lot of this stuff happens, or did happen over the years, than be. And I suppose the risk is than be proven wrong or be proven completely going in the wrong direction by finding the actual answer.
she would have made
Um,
great friends with Graham Hancock.
oh, yeah, exactly. Um, but I think that's part of it. It's got to be. I think it's sort of intergenerationally. I think some people just, and it's down to personality as well, isn't it? Some people just are very bad at saying, you know what? We don't know, but we do it, and it's fun, and maybe one
Yes,
day, yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
Why can't so people who celebrate Midsummer now, who care? Like we do it and it's fun. It's
Yeah.
So
Mm.
so speaking of which, was the Christian St. John's Day established to take over a pagan holiday?
I'm gonna say it was set up to replace the holiday of uh, Wartlicken, where people would find the most warty, grim little sort of blob of a person in the county, and everyone would go, give a little lick, and they'd be like, oh, and
I
the
would
church didn't
celebrate that
like it.
ancient Germanic holiday. Are we licking the toads that get you high? Is that what that is?
I mean, it could work. It could work. Obviously, I'm extrapolating from Jet St. John's Wort, but I'm going to say no.
No.
Okay, I'm going to say no. It's not clear, maybe, but no,
No, no.
no.
St. John's Day was established in the fourth century.
Mm.
And the first written mention that we have of Midsummer, the festival, not Summer Solstice, but
Hmm.
Midsummer, the festival was 9:30. It's much too late, unfortunately. But
So
back
why
to
what? So why St. John then? Is it just a day when he was martyred, or?
and so this is apparently the day that he was martyred. But baptisms, marriages, and blessings of sheep, animals, and fields became popular around this time, and so he became associated with baptisms and obviously blessing of the fields and all that kind of thing.
Okay.
And that's possibly why St. John's Day was put around this time.
Mm.
But St. John is not the only one who is celebrated at this time. St. Anne's Day is the 26th.
Hmm.
And the Feast of St. Peter and St. Paul is the 29th of June, giving people a chance to celebrate for many days. And in quite a few places all over Europe, the week from the 23rd to the 29th was loosely referred to as Midsummer. And in the Middle Ages, this became a popular, like, sort of quarter day festival or quarter day week.
Hmm.
And the early church claims that it was St. John's birthday. And then there are others say, no, he was martyred on that day, but
Okay.
because the Gospel of Luke says that John was conceived 6 months before Christ. How he knows that, I would love to know.
Mm.
But we don't actually know when that day was. The church picked this day, and we know that they weren't fond of the magic elements of the holiday, because they do mention things like, the church does mention they didn't like bonfires, they didn't like the magical associations with the day, like the doing of the birch trees, the John's wort, and that kind of thing, but they tolerated it. They didn't seem to ban anything or outlaw anything.
No.
The first mentions of celebrations of Saint Jean Baptiste, as it's known here in North America, dates back to 1606, when settlers en route to the future Acadia rested on the coast of Newfoundland, June 23rd. So St. John's Day is huge in Newfoundland, actually, and so too as well here in Quebec. We have like, unfortunately, it used to actually not be that big of a holiday,
Hmm.
and then in the 1970s it just exploded as like Le Fête Nationale. And now it is very widely celebrated, but it has no religious association whatsoever. People just call it. It's why I mean, old people will still call it Saint Jean, but now it's Fête Nationale, and that's it.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
What happens when
Awesome.
it rains on St. John's?
What happens when it rains on St. John's? People get wet.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
It rains.
Yeah.
That's what happens. There, for some reason, there's a lot of weather folklore and superstitions around St. John's Day, probably again because
Okay.
of farming and that kind of thing. People in Latin
Oh, so
country,
is this like a prognostication thing? So if it rains on St. John's, then this will
yes,
happen. Right. Okay.
yes, yes. So people in Latin countries pray for rain, because it's the beginning of the monsoon season. And so
Ah,
the San Juan is the beginning of their monsoon season.
right.
The big joke here in Quebec is that it always rains on St. John and it's always sunny on Canada Day. And so too, it is supposed to be the same thing this year.
Okay.
In Ireland, it's considered good luck to take sticks and wisps from the communal fire or ashes and put them on your field. And like we say, the divination in general has always been part of this time of the year. And so, like, the rain would put out the cinders and put the ash on your field. That's how it is.
Okay.
Um, Late 12th century, penitential Bartholomew Iscanus declared that he who hath feast on Saint John Baptist, does any work of sorcery to seek out the future shall do penance for 15 days. And that's about it. That's so, but everybody looked for superstitions, rains, things like that. Even the Lacnunga prescribes vervain gathered on Midsummer Day for liver complaints. And so there's tons of folklore and divination, prognostication around this day. But rain, for some reason, seems to be the biggest thing, and I assume it's because of the fields. We
Okay.
don't have any other evidence otherwise, but it makes sense because everybody was asking for baptisms, blessings of the fields. Like we said, there's that record in Henry III's time of him sending people around the fields to bless the fields. So, this is where I thought you were going with the frog dance, Mark.
Okay.
What is St. John's dance? I know you know what this is, but probably not by name.
Interesting. Okay. Uh, is it something that happens in the UK?
It's something that happens in many places, actually.
Oh, is it maypole dancing?
Ah!
Oh no. Okay, okay.
No, St. John's Dance is a bout of choreomania that hit Europe many times in the Middle
Oh,
Ages.
oh right, yeah,
On
okay.
June the
Yeah.
24th, 1374, one of the biggest outbreaks was in Aachen,
Yeah.
before spreading to other places. It spread to Cologne, Flanders, Franconia, Metz, etc., Strasbourg, etc., and regions and countries such as like Italy, Luxembourg. Further episodes continued in 1375 and 1376, with incidences in France, Germany, and the Netherlands. And in 1381, there was a huge outbreak in Augsburg. Further incidences occurred in 1418, where the dancing lasted for days and people died from exhaustion.
I
Another
can imagine.
outbreak in 1428, and in Schaffhausen, a monk danced himself to death. And in the same year, a group of women in Zurich were reportedly completely in a dancing frenzy. And the small town of Lausitz in Central Europe recorded a record surviving from 1360 describes women and girls acting crazily, dancing and shouting through the streets at the foot of the Virgin Mary. So we have no idea what happened here.
No.
The great dancing plagues of the late Middle Ages.
Yeah, and there are one of my favorite books is about mass hysteria
Mhm.
and the weird
Was
things
it
that people.
though? What do you think, Mark?
Well,
What do
I
you...
it's hard to say. It's hard to, in that sense. I wouldn't, can't completely dismiss the notion that it's a communicable disease, for example, or maybe just a love of the Lord. But it's interesting. It's interesting though how this stuff does happen. I would though posit a modern iteration of this, and that is Techno Viking. Yeah, yeah. That dance, it was stuck in my head for. It's still there. If I think about it now, it's just there. And then when he's sort of pointing at the guy, and then someone offers him some water. Wow, intense. Sorry, you weren't expecting that, were you?
Imagine him like coming to town like Peter, with his flute and everything, and then start
Yeah.
doing his like stomping dance.
Yeah, and people just can't. Yeah, I couldn't look away. Um, thank goodness for power cuts.
Well, some people, obviously, some historians say maybe it was ergot poisoning since it was that time of the year.
Right, yeah,
Some
yeah.
people say maybe like fleas that caused some kind of very serious illness. Others say that there were other diseases that caused convulsions. But one theory that I quite like is that these dances were purposely done.
Okay.
And some people say maybe for religious reasons, because there was that one instance of the women doing these dances at the foot of the Virgin Mary.
Hmm.
So possibly, and it's very interesting that people that hundreds of people started doing this, and they would literally dance themselves to death. So I think it might have been purposeful. I actually don't think it was a disease or an illness, because ergot poisoning, yes, you do get convulsions, but I mean, if you eat enough of them, you die pretty quick. Like there's no, you're not gonna stand up and dance. You know,
Yeah.
you're gonna be on the floor writhing in agony
Mm.
if you
Mm.
ate enough of it.
Mm.
I do think that they were probably purposeful, because there was a record actually uh of somebody saying that they were purposeful in the 1600s. There was saying that no, we actually did specific dance purposely. So it's possible. I mean, I find it weird that people would go as far as dance themselves to death. Maybe there was a particularly bad harvest that year, or they were expecting it, so people did it to hopeful. But anyway,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
none of them as good as Techno. You know what they needed Techno Viking.
Yeah, they did.
He's got to come and point to bless the fields.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then what's amazing about that dance though is that he's so his dancing is hypnotic. It's kind of like it's got that sort of angular,
Yeah, of
and
course.
yet he's also quite agile. Yeah, he would have changed people's lives. He did change people's lives.
And last bonus question mark. Actually, no.
Uh-huh.
Well, so this one is, what does the Hanuvakna, the looped square, have to do with Saint John?
I don't know.
So this is a very interesting thing. So the Hanuvakna, again, I apologize to the Suomi in the land. I apologize for my Finnish pronunciation. Uh, is Saint John's arms.
Okay.
And we know that this day was originally in Finland for Ukko, as we said, the god of thunder. But suddenly this kind of the crossed arms became a very popular symbol. And a lot of people said that it was a pagan symbol that got appropriated by St. John the Baptist, but we don't really have any evidence for that appropriation. And it was the Hanun is the word that is for the coat of arms, but which belongs to the Hanun. Hanu is for John, but we have no idea. In Finland, it's an apotropaic charm, and a symbol that was painted and carved on houses and barns and domestic utensils and tableware, saying to protect them from evil. And that's it. The oldest surviving example that we have of this is on a pair of skis that's 1,000 years old. So in the Finnish pre-Christian period. But why they would, it seems like just a symbol for protection of evil. So again, it's that whole like, that idea of like St. John, the blessing, protection from evil. Again, we don't really know why they picked specifically this time of year. So if no one celebrated the solstices except Neolithic peoples, and Midsummer is neither a Celtic nor a Germanic nor Slavic ancient holiday, where did it come from, and why do people think it's pagan?
I'm going to say it's new. It's the 1970s, man. It's people just making connections and having fun with it.
You're so close, Soup. You're so close. Do you want to think of one of our favorite friends?
Oh, is it? Oh, which one? We have so many favorite friends.
Because Sir James Fraser,
right?
Said,
okay.
And Jacob Grimm, said so.
Okay.
Romantic antiquarians mistakenly said that stone monuments were used by Druids to worship the sun at solstice, but we have never had evidence of this. Really, it was probably an amalgamation of old seasonal holidays or farming holidays that got moved around due to the calendar changes, actually. Because before the calendar change, Midsummer's Day fell on July 5th.
Okay. Yeah.
So think
which is closer to actual midsummer, actually. You know.
In the old calendar, yes, exactly, yeah, for sure. So think of that also might explain why like there's that whole month shift. Obviously,
Mm,
so think of like Bealtaine is a month before Midsummer, and then again like Lunacy again a month before. So it's a
mm,
possibility that Germanic peoples had other summer cultural holidays, because like we
mhm,
said, this whole Midsummer thing, especially with maypoles, began in the Germany and France region.
mm,
So it's possible that they had a regional holiday that was then spread out. And then with the
mm.
changing of holidays and then with the Reformation and all this thing, that this holiday suddenly just sprouted from nowhere. I mean, like we said, June is shearing season, it's working season, marrying season. And when the old with the changing of the calendar and the changing of the laws, and then as well in the Middle Ages, Midsummer was made an official holiday in places like Iceland and Sweden. And then that holiday, once it was made official, came to rival May Day.
Yeah, yeah.
And really, it was popularized by Shakespeare, Arthurian myth as well. They go down to find the Grail in
Okay.
Midsummer. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and as well, there's a lot of biblical like legends to do with Saint John, stories of him going out and doing things.
And I think I might be wrong, but I think it turns up in, because of that, probably turns up in the Lord of the Rings as well, doesn't it? The idea of midsummer being a date upon which you can rely that everyone knows about, and things happen, the day or before that or after that. Because of, I'm thinking about, is it Gandalf at one point says that some Black Riders were seen crossing a bridge on Midsummer's Eve or something like that.
I can't
But
remember if it's May Day or Midsummer's Eve. I can't
yeah,
remember. I will have to look that
but
up. But he
but
does
that,
he does give a
yeah,
seasonal attribution, yeah.
yeah, but even if it's not specifically that instance, the fact that he's a scholar of all that other stuff means that it comes through as what feels, and this I guess comes down to what you were talking about in terms of why do people need something to have an ancient attestation. Um, it feels old
Yes.
to date the year like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for better or worse.
To put flowers on your head and dance around maypoles and all that. It
Yeah,
feels old. It's actually I'll be honest, much of what we celebrate at Midsummer is a medieval invention.
yeah, yeah.
That's it. And the fires are something that's kind of always been there. But
Mm.
the biggest thing that did happen at Midsummer around this time of year was the plague. Um,
Yep.
it's true. A lot of the plague outbreaks were
Mm.
mostly in June and July,
Yeah.
and they started in June and they would last all the way until August. And
Mhm.
so it was a huge thing for people.
Mm.
And uh, flies flies were a big thing, obviously for cattle.
Mhm.
Lice as well, typhus. These are all summer pests and diseases. Locusts for your crops, obviously.
Mhm.
But these were all ergot poisoning, like we said. And I think it was just a time where people needed work was hard. And it makes
Mm.
sense that there would be no major holiday in the middle of in the northern hemisphere in the middle of one of the
The
working time
busiest
of the
time of
year.
year.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah.
it does make sense that you would, if you don't know why your cattle are dying, you would want to cast a blessing or something, anything that you
Mm.
can do to try to help them. But I
Mm.
think that's about it, honestly.
Mm. Okay.
Sorry, kids. So, Mark, I think you got most of these right this time.
Yeah, well, 7.5 to 5.5 by my calculation. I don't know if I'm way out or not, but
Oh,
yeah.
wait, what it says I'm the Frankunator? Is there an L missing somewhere?
Oh, no, 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 no,
Oh, it's
no.
okay. It's oh, okay. I read
It could be
Frank Kuhn.
Franconate. Yeah, Franconator. Yeah, yeah,
I like that I'm Frank Kuhn. Like I'll be doing ubu faces.
yeah.
But for your midsummer mark, you
Uh-huh.
get the gift of
Extra reading.
yay
Hooray.
further reading. And I want
Yep.
everybody. This one is amazing. There was
Okay.
a wonderful paper done that you can read, and it is called Midsummer Solstice, as it was or was not observed by pagan Germany, Scandinavia, and Anglo-Saxon England. It is an absolutely incredible article. It's on JSTOR, and it goes through everything. As well, the Penguin Guide to Superstitions of Britain and Ireland.
Uh-huh.
Um, and The English Year by Steve Roud. Both of them absolutely excellent and go into very detail. Steve Roud specifically goes into detail about how really it's Midsummer Eve that unfortunately solidified a lot of like what we think are ancient pagan customs into public memory, and they're just not. So
And finally, I just wanted to say, have you ever watched the TV series Midsummer Murders?
oh my gosh, a while ago, but I haven't seen it in a very,
It's,
very long time, and I haven't seen the whole thing. But yes, it
I mean,
is.
in the show, it's just a region in and around Oxfordshire, but I often think that together with Morse, it's just the most dangerous part of the world, really, to live. So if anyone's thinking about moving to Oxfordshire, don't move to there because you'll be murdered. Yeah.
No, you won't be murdered. I mean, or maybe you will. You maybe you will by the accent. You'll be destroyed by the very round tones
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
that dwell there.
Yeah. Yeah. A scholar
Miriam
is never late, Frodo Baggins. Yeah.
Miriam Margolyes's accent will
Yeah.
leap forth from the city center and attack you.
Yeah.
I love her so much because she did grow up in Oxford. And whenever she goes on a show, she goes, "Oh no, you know, I'm not posh at all. I'm very not posh." And so and then she'll, you know, shove an ice cream in her mouth or eat an onion in front of somebody and you go, "Oh, you're not posh." And then 2 seconds later, she will say to somebody, she'll go, "No, no, you mustn't say so fun. You must say such fun."
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Mm,
I just laughed. I went, "Oh, so posh without knowing." It's so
yeah.
good.
We all have our things.
And
Um,
this is why you should never go to
I specifically have no opinion on the matter, uh, because I know it's far too many people who did. So
Are
and
they okay? Are they
they
okay?
would hurt me. They would hurt me. Well, in that case, no, they're not, I guess.
And
But there's nothing clippable here.
I know all of these are going to show up on your channel afterward. I know.
Yeah. Mm,
Anyway, thank you, Mark, for playing. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We hope you have a very fun midsummer. We will be back for two very special things.
uh-huh.
One is ancient aliens. We're going to be
Oh
talking
yeah.
about archaeological conspiracies
Yeah.
with another very special guest. And then we will be doing August. We will be doing the history of Lammas or Lumisa.
Oh, okay. Okay. Obviously, I won't be able to say much about the conspiracies because,
Yes, yeah, and you're under contract.
yeah,
Yes, you can't tell
yeah,
people.
I
Yeah,
can't,
no, no,
they will,
that's
yeah,
okay.
see that.
Indiana Jones told me all about the Dial of Destiny. I don't need to hear it from you.
But did he? That's the thing. Did he? Anyway,
Or I'll just go consult the aliens.
oh well, yeah. I mean, if you can, yeah, yeah,
Well,
do
you
it.
can. So if you can, I can.
I never confirmed that.
You didn't deny it either.
You need to stop recording now, right now.
Oh no, the aliens are going to come.